As a kid, all a nigga wanna have was a Burberry scarf and $3 in my pocket. Instead I got beat with a switch, but I don't give a fuck, but it's on my body. Scars all up on me, but I run around from everybody. Life lesson learned, I better learn from this bitch, nobody. She pushed me around, she didn't give no motherfucks about it. She broke my heart 3 times, but I ain't getting...
Do you guys know what's one of the weirdest things about life? When you do something good, barely anybody notices, barely anybody talks about it. But as soon as you do one wrong thing, everybody and their grandma is going to be hopping on your back about it. And that's how I look at special teams in football. For special teams, when they're doing their job, when they're making field goals, when they're punting the football successfully, putting the team inside the 20, nobody talks about special teams. But as soon as a field goal kicker misses a field goal or a punt gets blocked, everybody talks about special teams. And for the Tennessee Titans this season, special teams has been their Achilles heel. This is the second game this season that the Titans have lost, in large part due to a terrible performance on special teams. Remember a couple of weeks ago against the Pittsburgh Steelers? The Titans lost that game because of special teams. You had that missed field goal, which would have sent the game into overtime by Stephen Gostkowski. And also, don't forget, you had the pretty big punt return as well on Pittsburgh's side. And once again, in this game on Thursday Night Football, and this loss to the Indianapolis Colts, special teams has kicked the Tennessee Titans in the rear end once again. Okay, they seemed like they didn't know how to punt the football. They had a block punt, which went for a touchdown. Special teams was just off today in this game against the Indianapolis Colts. And the Colts pulled off the victory 34-17. Now, for Tennessee, I'm really upset. And I'm upset for 2 reasons. First of all, I predicted them to win this game, and they lost. But what irritates me more is that Derrick Henry should have had 2 touchdowns that he got robbed of, and instead they gave it to Jonnu Smith and D'Onta Foreman. That really irritated me. Because I have Derrick Henry on my fantasy team. I know a lot of you guys may not care about my fantasy team, but I want to vent my frustration. Okay, Derrick Henry got robbed of 2 touchdowns. I don't give a hoot if he got stopped on the goal line once. Let my guy score his 2 touchdowns so I can get my fantasy points. Derrick Henry should have had over 20 points tonight. And he didn't, because he got robbed of 2 touchdowns. They want to do some jet sweeps to Jonnu Smith and D'Onta Foreman. Okay, whatever. Okay, I guess nobody cares as long as you win the game, as long as you score. Who cares? But I'm a little bit upset about that. I'm not even going to hold you guys. I am a little bit upset about that. Because Derrick Henry should have had over 20 points tonight in fantasy football. But regardless, let's get back to what everybody cares about, the game. So neither one of these 2 teams were good on third down. But the difference between the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans is that the Indianapolis Colts were getting big chunk plays all night. They were having like 20, 30, 40-yard gains. Meanwhile, Tennessee, they were doing what they do the best on the offense, methodically moving down the field. Okay? And Michael Pittman, the rookie for the Indianapolis Colts out of USC, had a really good game for Indianapolis. Okay, he played really well. He was a big reason why the Colts won this game. When the Colts needed a big play, Michael Pittman stepped up. And Michael Pittman is going to be huge for the Indianapolis Colts going down the stretch because they still don't really have all that much talent at the wide receiver position. So when you look at the implications of this game, okay, you have Indianapolis that moves to 6-3 on the year, and Tennessee drops to 6-3 on the year. So as of right now, Indianapolis has control of the AFC South as long as they continue to win games. And that matchup in 2 weeks against Tennessee in the rematch, which is going to be on November 29th, I believe, is going to be huge. Because whoever wins that game is pretty much going to win the AFC South if they're able to win out the rest of the season. So this was a really important game for both of these 2 teams. And the Tennessee Titans lost this game because of special teams. And special teams, like I said earlier, is something that nobody really cares about until it's losing you football games. And for Tennessee, this isn't just a one-year occurrence that they have struggled on special teams. Remember that Tennessee had their fair share of problems last year on special teams as well. And if you're a Titans fan, I don't know, how do you trust Steven Gostkowski? Okay? Like, he's too on and off me. Like, I don't trust him. Like, when you have a field goal kicker, you will want to have a field goal kicker who you can go out there and trust that he's going to be able to make the field goal 9 out of 10 times. Okay, now maybe he may have a rare miss here and there, but you would like your field goal kicker to be consistent. Steven Gostkowski is not consistent. Every time he goes out there to kick a field goal, I think there's a 60 to 40 chance that he's going to make it or miss it. That is not good. I don't know how you trust Steven Gostkowski, especially when you're in the very critical part of the season where every game is pretty much going to be close. Every game is going to have a playoff atmosphere because you're going to have teams that are going to be fighting for playoff positioning, and you're going to have some teams who are desperate fighting for the playoff lives. So at this point in the season, kicker is very important. And I've been telling a lot of people this. Kicker is now starting to become one of the most important positions in football. You have quarterback, you have the offensive line, then you have kicker. Kicker is the difference between winning football games and having a guy who's going to be on the hot seat. Ask Hugh Jackson how he feels about not having a great kicker. Ask Matt Nagy about how not having a kicker made the Chicago Bears lose in the playoffs a couple of years ago with the infamous double doink. So having a good kicker really matters. And special teams is a really important part of football that nobody talks about. I had a coach in middle school that used to talk about special teams is underrated because if you can execute well on special teams, you can get hidden yardage. There is hidden yardage in special teams is what my middle school coach told me. Because at first I was playing on the offensive side of football and I was playing linebacker and I also had to play special teams. I was like, Coach, why do we practice special teams so much? Like, who cares about special teams? It's not that hard. You're punting the football or you're kicking the field goal. Who cares about special teams? He said, JT, never ever disrespect special teams like that again. Because the good teams are able to execute well on special teams. You can get hidden yardage in special teams. And a really important aspect of why special teams is a really underrated part of the game of football is because of field positioning. Field positioning matters in the NFL. Okay? If you're able to dominate special teams, you can get that hidden yardage and you can get good field position because of it. Or you can put your team at a disadvantage and give them bad field position, which is why special teams is kind of underrated. And if you're able to execute it well, it can benefit you. And if you're not good at it, then it can bite you in the rear end like it is Tennessee so far this season. So for the Tennessee Titans, you did everything you wanted to do offensively, okay? Derrick Henry rushed for over 100 yards. He had a pretty nice game, even though he got robbed of his well-deserved 2 touchdowns. But I already elaborated on that enough. But for Tennessee defensively, Phillip Rivers had a field day. Had an absolute field day. So if you're a Titans fan, this is a really tough loss. You lost this game 34-17. And I don't necessarily think that you played bad, okay? I feel like your defense played really well, even though the score may indicate differently. Because one thing about the Colts is that they had a hard time converting on third down, which you also had a hard time converting on third down yourselves. But the Colts have had a hard time offensively converting on third down for basically the entire season. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL when it comes to being able to move the chains on third down. But they were able to pick up a couple of conversions on fourth down as well, which was also really huge. And also, the Tennessee Titans got a big stop inside the red zone on fourth down as well. But what was the big determining factor and why Tennessee lost this game was because of special teams. Okay? And if Tennessee can't get special teams figured out, they're going to have a hard time if they make it to the playoffs, which I do believe that they will make it to the playoffs. But this is a game that special teams really kick Tennessee in the rear end. And when you imagine what's going to happen when Tennessee gets in a close game. Okay, a one-possession game, it comes down to special teams, and they have a block punt or something that goes wrong. Imagine what's going to happen. So, of course, Tennessee Titans fans have a right to be upset with the special teams coordinator, whoever his name is. You see, I'm pretty sure a lot of Titans fans out there pretty much don't even know who the special teams coordinator is because nobody cares. But I guarantee you by tomorrow morning, everybody's going to be making tweets about how he needs to get fired. That just shows you how little people care about special teams until it costs you games. So for the Colts, this is a good victory. They moved to 6-3. They basically control their own destiny in terms of being able to secure one of those top 4 seeds in the AFC. Pretty much either the 3rd or 4th seed, trying to get one of those home field advantage matchups for the wild card when the NFL playoffs kicks off in a couple of weeks. And for the Titans right now, they're in a really awkward predicament. Okay, now regardless of what happens this weekend, they're still going to be in the wild card mix. They're not going to just completely drop out. But now you leave the door open that there is a possibility that if you don't win the division, you could miss the playoffs. And I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying that that could happen. Same thing for the Colts. They have to be able to finish the job against Tennessee in the second go-around. That is going to be one of the biggest games of the season. That is going to be one of the biggest games that is going to decide playoff seed. And to remind you, that is what, week 12, I believe, that they face the Tennessee Titans again. So that game is going to be huge. That's going to be one of the first games that we have of determining who's going to end up locking up one of the first 4 seeds in the playoffs. In Tennessee and Indianapolis case, one of those, either the 3 or the 4 seed, who's going to end up hosting a game at home in the playoffs. So good job, good game by the Indianapolis Colts. And for the Tennessee Titans, I mean, I think you played pretty well defensively. Your offense was, your offense was all right. It wasn't as good as what it could have been, but special teams really bit you in the butt this game.